Herzlich willkommen bei der englischen Woche. Although we are a German-speaking podcast, now and then we have a guest we have to interview, which is why we introduced the englische Woche. Our today's guest was sent to China for the first time by a Saudi Arabian prince decades ago. Jeffrey Towson is a medical doctor from Stanford University of Medicine, was a professor at Beijing University, is a visiting professor at CEIBS in Shanghai. He's also a best-selling book author. His book, The 1 Hour China Book, has hundreds of 5-star reviews on Amazon. Oh yeah, and not to forget his 3.1 million LinkedIn followers. Today he talks to us about what Silicon Valley can learn from China's tech companies and the other way around. He also shares his top 3 industry trends for 2023, so be sure to listen till the end. If you like this episode, leave us a review and share it with your friends and colleagues. Enjoy!
Made in China. Von der Werkbank der Welt zum größten Konsumentenmarkt und Technologieführer. Eine Reise durch das Leben, Business und die Kultur im Reich der Mitte mit Damian Maib und Thomas Derksen.
Okay, so Jeffrey, welcome to our podcast. We start our podcast with a small game. It's very, very easy. It's called the A-B game. So I will you ask a question and there are 2 things. For example, I will ask you cat or dog and then you answer as quick as possible and you say?
Dog.
Okay, Damian, let's begin.
Okay, let's start with the warm-up game. Jeffrey, Beijing or Shanghai?
Beijing.
Beijing duck or hamburger?
Beijing duck.
Pad Thai or chow mein?
Chow mein.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Taxi or subway?
Subway.
Subway or tuk-tuk?
Subway.
First or business?
Business.
American Airlines or Air China?
Neither. American Airlines. Barely.
WhatsApp or WeChat?
Oh, WeChat.
TikTok or Douyin?
Douyin.
Taobao or Amazon?
Taobao.
LinkedIn or Twitter?
Twitter.
Speech or panel discussion?
Speech.
I knew you would choose that because you had a lot of very successful speeches, as everyone can see on your LinkedIn profile. So welcome everyone to follow Jeffrey on LinkedIn and on the other social media platforms. And now we start with our interview and we're really looking forward to it.
No, I appreciate it. Those are good questions. There's Douyin versus TikTok is a very good question.
Yeah, we can talk about it later. I also have my personal preference and experiences about it.
I mean, yeah, it is there are differences, which most people don't know unless I do like Douyin better.
Absolutely. Yeah, we will hear more about that in the podcast. So a very warm welcome, Jeffrey, to our session today. And in the beginning, we always love to ask our guests about their China stories. So please tell us what brought you to China in the first place.
Yeah, a little random, I suppose. I left the U.S. I was working sort of management consulting, Manhattan, standard stuff, right? Standard career path. And I ended up doing a project for a Saudi prince, Al Walid, the guy who kind of owns Citibank and Four Seasons. And that took me out of the U.S. and I spent decent years. And then he kind of sent me to China on a project and I just kind of stayed. It just was exciting. And then I ended up stopping working for him, but I sort of stayed in China and became a professor and a consultant and then a bit of a, let's say, influencer or whatever you want to call that. And now I live in Asia. I don't have a home in the U.S. anymore. No, I'm permanent. Yeah, I'm a transplant.
That's crazy. Sent to China by a Saudi Arabian prince. We never had this kind of story before. And as you already mentioned, you live a very cosmopolitan life. You travel the world, you give speeches, you do your business influencing thing. Right now you are in Bangkok. So what does a typical day in your life look like? Let me guess. You get up at 6 a.m. every morning, take a jog at the beach, then having a pad thai or a coconut milk after that, and then you're working till 11 p.m. Am I right?
No, not really. It's I'm simple. All I do is study companies and then I advise people, right? Companies usually. And then you invest a little bit, or you write about it, or it's a thinking job. It's a thinking, and I don't run anything. I'm a terrible CEO. Like, I'm a terrible operator. So it's a lot of, 6 to 8 hours of reading and writing every day, which is studying TikTok and Alibaba and digital companies. And then the rest of the day is usually talking on the phone with clients, CEOs, maybe want a second opinion. And then you do consulting engagements, which get you on a plane or, a talk or something. So no, it's not that complicated. And there's no beaches in Bangkok. Most of work-wise is China, Germany, a lot of Brazil right now. There's a huge intersection between China and Brazil right now. So those sort of areas that have a natural intersection with China or digital thinking.
And Thomas has already mentioned it in the introduction. You are the proud author of the 1 Hour China book, together with Jonathan Wütz, the senior partner of McKinsey. In this book, you explain all of China business, you claim. So that is naturally a huge task, and doing that in 1 hour. And readers seem to like it. You've got a couple of hundreds of 5-star reviews on Amazon. Could you give us and our audience a brief abstract of the book?
Yeah, that was, we wrote the first version in 2014. Jonathan, who is sort of one of the senior China people of McKinsey & Co. And it was just that, China went from being an obscure topic in 2007 to, some people knew about it, but most didn't. And then it went mainstream. And then, it's very hard to do business multinational if you don't understand it, right? It's hard to look at Volkswagen if you don't understand their China sales, right? How can you understand that anymore? Or, all these companies, Geely so it's became more and more necessary, but your average CEO is not going to read 10 China books, right? It's a big subject. So we said, well, we'll write a 1 hour book for a busy but really smart executive. Like, if you were coming in as a consulting gig, this is and I had an hour of the senior vice president of whatever, this is what I would say. And we basically told them there's 6 mega trends you have to keep your eye on. If you watch these 6 trends, you'll pretty much get a good sense of what's going to happen. And then we called it the 1 Hour China book because it takes 1 hour to read, really 1.5 hours. And because I thought it was clever, and because my sister-in-law drinks that 5-hour energy drink, and I always thought that was like funny. So we kind of made the same. Anyway, it became a bestseller, which is not as big a deal as it sounds. And it stayed there for about 5 to 6 years. So it's, we just released an updated version 2 months ago. But yeah, it's, we call it like kind of the starter book for busy executives who are trying to get their brain around the fact that China is really, really big and it's really complicated. I mean, it's not a small subject. Sort of step number 1.
So you already mentioned the book was published in 2014. And to the title, I read a book by Tim Ferriss, The 4-Hour Work Week, before. I didn't succeed in having a just 4-hour work week, but it's also very interesting. So people seem to really like and be interested in books or in things that can save them time, because time is the most precious resource we have got, right? So also about time, the book was published in 2014, already more than 8 years have passed since then. And what is the difference between the 2014 version and the 2023 version? Because there have been significant changes all around the world, and especially in China. No country in the world, I would say, is changing faster than China. Can you tell us about the changes of the last 8 years?
Yeah, I mean, we updated in 2017 and again this year. What we really tried to point at is, look, there's certain economic mega trends that are rock solid, that have been going on for 20 years, 30 years. And these aren't trends like, oh, people are aging. No, these are trends that show up in the top line or the bottom line of a company. I have to see it in the revenue, or I have to see it in the cost structure. And those are the ones we looked at. And we kind of talked about manufacturing scale, rising Chinese consumers, digital China, urbanization, capital, things like that. The 6 trends we had are No, they haven't changed in 10 years. You can track them 20 to 30 years, so they're fine. The one we probably would add if we were going to do it now is the internationalization aspect. I mean, if you're doing business in Asia, Southeast Asia, you're dealing with China. I mean, it is just, Thailand, Indonesia, it's all Chinese companies, it's all Chinese capital, a lot of Chinese expertise. So they are much more of a regional player now than they were. Now, they have presence in a lot of countries. You'll see Germany, Brazil. But in terms of Asia, I mean, China is a major factor almost everywhere now. That's probably, we didn't see that 10 years ago, nearly as much. So it's probably the integration with the region that is the biggest change. And then you could talk about the political upheavals of the last couple of years. We don't go into that too much. I don't think that changes too much, actually. I think it's kind of over. I think it's more of a media story than a reality. There's some real stuff there too, but it's fading away now anyways. Like now China's, now it's not a big deal, but 8 months ago it was. So.
And Jeffrey, how did the pandemic in the last 3 years change your view on China and your view on its economy?
Yeah, I don't think the pandemic changed the fundamentals at all. In terms of businesses, economics, consumers are spending, manufacturing's big. I mean, those major economic forces are all pretty much the same. Obviously, the government reaction was a big part of it. And so people wrote a lot about zero COVID and things like that. I think it's by most world standards, what we saw in China was more stringent than other places. But it wasn't actually that much of an outlier in Asia. I mean, China's response was not that different than, say, Japan's in many ways, or Singapore. People here are still wearing masks. They don't have to anymore. They haven't had to wear masks since July, but they still do. But definitely that sort of top-down government intervention was a big deal. And now they apparently have reversed it, like completely. Very quickly. So, you always have to sort of factor in the fact that China has a tremendous ability, for better or for worse, for top-down action. When they say we're going to build 200 airports, the airports get built, right? But when they say we're locking down for COVID, if you say that in Mexico, I spent a lot of time in Mexico, they say we're going to do X. It doesn't necessarily happen. But
same in Germany.
They can execute at scale very effectively when they choose to, for better or for worse. So we saw that. I think things are pretty much back to normal soon. It looks, I'm going back there in a couple of weeks, and we'll see.
That is a very interesting point of view. And we hope that in the future, this top-down approach will just be used for the better. So let's talk a little bit about the future. And you're going back to China in a couple of weeks. What could you tell our listeners and say them? What are the 3 mega trends for 2023 in your eyes? I mean, trends are for a long time, normally for 10, 20, 30 years. But is there some topics that our listeners should pay attention to in 2023, like a top 3?
Yeah, I mean, number one is you're going to look at Chinese consumers, right? They are a huge economic force. I mean, not just that, it's large money. I mean, it's big money. You take the e-commerce spending of China, that's number one. And then you take the US, that's number 2. You can take the US, the UK, Japan. You can take numbers 2 through 9, add them up, and it's still less than China. Right? These are big dollars. And the growth rate is also very, very large. So that's a big deal for any CPG companies, brand companies, anyone selling. That's going to be a big deal. Even if you're not selling to Chinese consumers, the other factor you'd look at is sort of digital China, which is they have the most innovative sort of digital interactions with consumers pretty much anywhere in the world. It was not at all a surprise that TikTok went global, right? because all of these companies, TikTok, Douyin, Bilibili, Alibaba, Taobao, they're so far ahead of most everywhere else in their sophistication that, I talked to a decent number of companies in China, and they will have their team in China that's doing all the digital marketing, right? That team ends up being basically the training ground for the rest of the company because it's so far ahead that they end up then copying, right, what you're doing in digital marketing in China to, say, Latin America. So they're really the frontier for digital consumer interactions, right? It's live streaming, short video, gifting, social media. That's all out of China, right? So that frontier is a lot of what I talk about with clients around the world. Like, this is what's coming next, right? Because we can already see it on the ground there. It's going to show up in Brazil next year. That's number 2. Number 3 is probably manufacturing base. The manufacturing base is still huge, even though people talk about shifting manufacturing to other places. And it's not just huge, it's digitizing very, very quickly, right? It's that combination of digital power plus manufacturing scale where, half the world's industrial robots are now in China, right? So anything that sort of combines industrial scale with digital, China is going to be one of the leaders. There'll be a couple of them. You can see this in electric vehicles now and autonomous vehicles. Who's giving Elon Musk a run for his money? It's probably BYD in China, right? They're the only one who's selling as many AVs as he's selling. They're not really AVs, but they're EVs, right? Those companies are fairly formidable. And it's the same thing I just said. It's manufacturing scale plus digital innovation and a massive domestic consumer market that they can build upon, right? Those are probably the 3 factors I keep my eye on. A lot of robots and things, DJI drones, there's a lot going on. Huawei, which has, become very political, but they're rolling out 5G at unbelievable speed.
And you mentioned also that the TikTok now, or Douyin, how it's called in China by ByteDance, is actually one of the first really global success cases of Chinese companies conquering the world. Because either you've got American companies conquering the world but China, like Facebook and Instagram, or you've got like Chinese companies, WeChat, who are then not kind of expanding beyond its borders, right? So Douyin with TikTok was quite an unusual success case. And then maybe there's 2 questions here at once. Why? You answered before, you find Douyin is better than TikTok. And secondly, after Douyin and TikTok made this expansion, who would follow next? What industry would it be? For example, electric vehicles like NIO and BYD that you just talked about?
Yeah, they're moving quick. It's kind of been like 2 waves. The wave we've seen for a long time is consumer electronics, right? You go to India, you go to Latin America, everyone's using Chinese phones. You go to Africa, everyone's on Transsion, Oppo, Vivo, Xiaomi. They just dominate because that's the manufacturing scale, right? But, scooters, things like that. But they haven't gone up to cars, which are more complicated. But we're seeing that now. We're seeing BYD, we're seeing Geely, Great Wall. You go to somewhere like Jamaica, you'll see a ton of Chinese cars, right? They've sort of shied away from Europe and the US. They've gone after the developing economies first. So I think we'll keep seeing that trend. And I think we'll see Chinese automakers be one of the top 2 to 3 exporters of the world. That we've seen for a while. Smart speakers, smart TVs, all of that stuff. What TikTok kind of shocked people because this was just purely an app, right? Silicon Valley doesn't make TVs, they make software. Well, TikTok was purely software and it went into their home market and it beat them. It beat Facebook and it beat these. That kind of shocked people. But then Shein followed a year later and popped up as the #1 downloaded e-commerce app in the US, ahead of Amazon briefly. So that was like number 2. And Shein is everywhere. They are absolutely everywhere. And then third, we saw Temu, which is Pinduoduo's new app, which is kind of a copy of Shein. That launched in October. It's been #1 in the US. Like, it is doing tremendous business in the US. So that's 3 apps out of China in the last 18 months that just kind of rocked people. So I think now it's like understood in China, we can go international and win, which I don't think they believed before. The next one I'd keep my eye on is probably Kwai, which in China is Kwai Show, but outside of China, it's KWAI. They're pretty much, I mean, they're short video, right? And they're kind of copying TikTok. They're already in Mexico and Brazil. You'll see billboards everywhere. Maybe Bilibili, because people keep talking about them going international. I think we're going to see a whole lot of these companies coming out. Binance. I mean, Binance is not really Chinese, but kind of, right? Like the founder, CZ, came out of, China, and now he's kind of international. A lot of the crypto people came out. I mean, this is, I don't think this is going away. I'd keep an eye on Binance. I'd keep an eye on Kwai. Temu's doing great. I mean, they're rocking in the US. It's huge money, apparently.
Yeah, there's some really eye-opening information here that I hadn't had on my radar before, because here in Europe and in the West, we are quite Eurocentric. We think the US and Europe are the ones who lead the world, to make the most important decisions. But you already mentioned Brazil twice in this talk, and you were talking about Saudi Arabia. So my question would be, do you think in 10, 20 years, the importance of Europe and the US will decline and the future will be made in South America, Asia, and in the Middle East?
I don't know. Relative position is hard to judge. Most of the companies that do well are based in a major domestic market, right? They get big at home and then they go abroad. Well, you can do that where? China, US, EU, right? These other players that come out of somewhere like Singapore or Brazil, they tend to stay local, right? They don't tend to break out of Brazil and then be big everywhere, right? So it helps if you come from a major domestic economy. In terms of innovation rate, which would be different than just size of market, I'm pretty bullish on Asia. I think Asia is incredibly innovative, and that's China plus. South Korea is very innovative, right? A lot going on. And I think that's lots of reasons. Culture. People adapt very quickly. Uptake and adoption is very fast. You come up with a good thing here, everyone starts using it in Asia very quickly. Those are kind of the markets I'm focused on, is probably Asia and the US more. Probably because I don't know as much about the EU. I kind of know Germany and I know North Italy because of the industrial base there, but I don't have a lot of, I think, deep insight into where the innovation's happening in the EU as opposed to the other regions. No, it's pretty great. I mean, who knows? The funny thing about digital as opposed to other technological waves was it used to be, if you were going to be an innovator technologically, you had to be in one of these big economies, right? If you're a major engine maker, you had to be in the US because that's where cars were being made. Digital can kind of come from anywhere. You can come up with a great video game in Thailand and it'll take off. You don't have to be based in these. It's kind of a highly democratic technology. You can be a TikTok star from anywhere. So I kind of like that. So maybe it'll percolate up from a lot of places we haven't seen before. We'll see. A lot of video games coming out of like the Philippines and stuff. And then you got Web3 coming out of the craziest places.
We've talked a lot about these, let's say, local companies moving to the West. But now also we want to talk about the Chinese consumers a little bit, because over the last couple of years, we've seen that local brands, so local Chinese brands, are getting better and better, and hence also more competitive. So Chinese customers don't only look to buy the premium Western brands, there are also good Chinese domestic alternatives. So does that mean from your point of view, that this golden area for foreign brands is coming to an end, or how can foreign brands still compete in the Chinese market?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends what sector you're talking about. If you're talking about vitamins and milk powder, Chinese consumers absolutely know what brands are from where, right? Because they're very concerned with the safety. They trust, Nestle and New Zealand milk more than Chinese milk. They just do, because there's been repeated scandals. If you talk about makeup, they sometimes know, like they want L'Oreal. But if you ask Chinese consumers, what country is L'Oreal from? Most of them think it's Chinese, right? Which is, L'Oreal does not sound Chinese at all. Most people don't actually know where companies are from. Like if you go to your local store and look at televisions, there's going to be LG. Most people have no idea what countries those are from. So it's a little bit of, sometimes they absolutely know. A lot of times they just don't. Was it Polo? Ralph Lauren, the famous joke, Ralph Lauren's real name is not Ralph Lauren, it's Ralph Lipschitz. And they just made up the name. What's the other one everyone always thinks about? Haagen-Dazs. Haagen-Dazs is an awesome one. Like if you ask people, where's Haagen-Dazs from? They always say Netherlands.
But it's a made up name, right?
It's from nowhere. It's not a language. They just made those words up. That is not any language. Haagen-Dazs, like with the dots of the eyes. It's totally made up, right? So, that branding thing is, but some cases it matters a lot. IVF, healthcare, safety, children's care, people. Then you talk to Chinese consumers, they absolutely know which is the German brand and which is not. So it's kind of a funny dynamic.
Yeah, and you talked about the Chinese internet and Chinese apps before. So we see that super apps like WeChat, where you can do everything from booking a doctor's appointment to booking your flight or paying your rent and chatting, dating, mobile games, everything. These are quite a Chinese phenomenon.
Yeah.
So what can Google and Facebook learn from companies like Tencent? And do you think that there will be any super apps in the future in the West?
Yeah, I think WeChat confused people because they said, oh, it's a super app. And whenever you ask super app, what does everyone say? Oh, WeChat. Well, what's another one? None. I think it's a bit of an anomaly of the Chinese system where we had you had 2 to 3 companies that controlled 50% of all the data traffic on phones. That's not usually what happens, right? So I think WeChat was a bit of an anomaly. I think what you're more going to see is maybe what we see in Southeast Asia, which is most people spend their time on 5 to 10 apps, right? You do your e-commerce here, you do your messenger there, you do your videos there. So this idea that it's going to come down to one, I think that's probably not true. I think it's like 5 to 10 will win. I think maybe the difference between like Asia, China, and let's say the US or Europe is digital companies in the US tend to stay in their lane. Uber does transportation, Facebook does social network, WhatsApp does messenger, right? Chinese companies don't do that at all. They jump lanes all the time. Like WeChat is now in e-commerce. They just jumped into e-commerce and they're doing real well. So people jump lanes all the time. And it almost becomes more of a team sport where WeChat works together with a bunch of companies. Alibaba works together with a bunch of companies. ByteDance is its own bit of a team. We don't really see that. Like, we don't see Uber jumping into, I don't know, Messenger. They kind of, I think that's a weakness. I think and also what we see out of China is software companies are more comfortable to get their hands dirty. They will open stores. They will get into retail. They will get into physical operations. They'll start manufacturing their own phones. Most Silicon Valley companies, it's like everyone just sits in codes, right? There's no operation. They just like to be pure software companies. Chinese companies, no, they'll open hundreds. Alibaba has acquired 600 retail stores in the last couple of years, 30 shopping malls, 80 department stores, right? Facebook doesn't do that. So I kind of like that they're a little bit more scrappy. So they're getting into hospitals. I think, was it TikTok? ByteDance, didn't they just buy a hospital?
I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, I think they bought maternity hospital
Wow,
Beijing. or
crazy.
something. One of them did. I think it was ByteDance. I kind of like, we don't see that in the US at all, right? They're pure breeds.
That is indeed a big move across the original business from being a social media and social commerce app to buying a maternity hospital in the own country.
Maybe Elon Musk, like he's the only one who just jumps all over the place, right? You're doing
You
what
would do
now?
that,
You're doing
yeah.
rockets and Twitter? Really? Okay. You're tunneling? Okay. There's a couple people like that in the US, but Jeff Bezos, I think, was the same. He jumped into video. He jumped into e-commerce, right? But those are kind of related. Yeah. No, people do anything in China.
On the other way around, in which areas do you think should and could Chinese tech companies learn from Silicon Valley?
If you're generally looking at B2C, direct to consumer facing, China, Asia is generally better in most everything, right? But if you go B2B enterprise, I think Europe and the US are better. I mean, if you look at the software that runs businesses, I mean, IBM has been putting ERP software into major banks for 30 years, right? So they are way ahead in terms of, when you go to most Chinese companies, it's pretty manual in the back office. And so because of that, when you start integrating things like, SaaS programs and AI, the West has a big advantage, right? So B2B tends to be stronger there. You will hear the argument that cutting edge technology tends to still come out of the US and Europe. China's better at adapting and implementing existing tech. They're better at implementing existing tech into lots of stuff quickly. Maybe the US is better at, new frontiers. That's still probably mostly true, but maybe not as much as it used to be. The only company putting up, as much payload into space as SpaceX is China, right? I mean, they're the only ones who match him in terms of just payload up to orbit every year. So going back to my earlier point, China's big and complicated, just like Europe. Like, I couldn't generalize about the EU. No, we'd have to talk about manufacturing here, and we'd have to talk about tourism in Greece. And it's very complicated. China's the same way. You got to everything's different. So it's hard to generalize too much.
You are also a close observer of AI. So what do you think? How will AI and tools like GPT change our lives in the following years?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all in on AI, like for several years now. It's stunningly important. And I think people really, like, the last 3 months, has really shocked people. Like, this is unbelievable what these programs are doing. It's not just ChatGPT. It's DALL-E, it's Stable Diffusion, it's Midjourney. It's, what these things can do is stunning. And I think people are now we're getting a glimpse of, that's kind of like, it's a huge deal. The last 3 months, I think we got the first solid look at what the future is going to look like in practice. It's like, wait, I just go in here and I say, write me a short story about a cute turtle, and 10 seconds later I have it. That's weird. Write me a pop song that sounds like In Sync, but about this subject, and make it kind of dark. And it creates the whole song, everything, the voice, the drums, all of it. It's pretty stunning. I've been writing a lot about this in the last month. I do a podcast, and I've been talking a lot about this, and I think a lot of big companies are going to get disrupted, especially Hollywood, Netflix, Disney. Anyone who's in the content creation business is going to have their world turned upside down. Not anyone, but most companies. Because, content creation at a high quality has now become sort of cheap and free, right? Anyone can do it. You want to be a painter, you can be a painter today. Forget painting school. You can start making high quality designs and paints right now. And that's crazy. You want to make a TV show? You can make a TV show yourself, sitting at your office in an hour, which is bad if you're a Hollywood studio. So it's pretty stunning.
And coming back to your book a little bit, in recent years, we have seen more and more people leaving Shanghai or other bigger cities to go back to their hometowns if they're not Shanghainese or originally from these tier one mega cities, because they want to live a maybe less stressful life, or the cost of living is significantly lower. At the same time, we see a lot of rise of content about the China's countryside on social media. Is there a kind of back to the roots movement here in China, or would that be the wrong conclusion?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, people talk about this. I don't really have an opinion. It's there is a big trend in every country in the world that everyone moves into the cities because it's a network effect, right? Everyone lives in San Francisco. Everyone lives in New York. We see it in every country. So there's this idea of like, look, human beings are more productive when you stick them in the same location. Okay. That said, China has, if you look at Chinese cities with over 1 million people, there's hundreds of them. Hundreds, right? So it's like, oh, I'm going out to Chengdu. Chengdu is a huge city, right? So you don't have to, I think I would probably make the distinction. I think there's a lot of reasons people are moving to urban environments, right? But China and Asia in general, it has the largest and most dense cities in the world, right? Like half the human race lives within 4 to 5 hours of Hong Kong. I mean, so you get these cities everywhere, like Chongqing. People don't know where Chongqing is. I think it's the biggest city in the world now. Like there's these massive cities all over, inland China. Chengdu's great. Kunming is cool. Right? Chongqing is phenomenal. So there's just a lot going on in Asia. And I'm not sure if that's a remote work thing or just the fact that there's a lot of people that live there. It's pretty fantastic. I like those cities. I almost prefer being out somewhere like Chengdu and Chongqing as opposed to, say, Beijing or Shanghai.
Yeah. I've been traveling a lot of Chinese cities, and it's crazy how many huge cities there are that no one or almost no one in the West knows about. So in China,
like Xiamen. Xiamen is a city people don't know about. Xiamen's fantastic.
Yeah. So in China, we like to talk about 5-year plans, especially in business and economy. So can you give us a glimpse? What are your personal and professional plans for the next 5 years? Or maybe you don't plan so long ahead?
I don't plan as much as I used to because I'm kind of settled in what I do. I basically study digital businesses, and I try and figure out why the best businesses do well. And then I work with companies and talk to them about what you can learn from them. And I spent half the year on the road, which is great fun. US, Europe, a lot of Brazil this last year. And then I write books and all that. And I don't really have any interest in doing it. Like my area is so interesting. Like I don't need to change anything. It's like, ooh, there's this new company called ChatGPT. It's like, well, holy cow. No, I'm pretty happy just sitting in my space. I don't really plan to change anything. I try and be more and more successful, but that's all I'm doing. And it's exciting. I mean, I sit at the intersection of sort of digital and Asia, right? Both of those are really interesting on their own.
Yeah.
Right. And when you put them together, it's like, oh, this is fantastic. So, yeah. No, I'm pretty content where I am, I suppose.
Great to hear that. And I think this is also this kind of approach to life that everyone has, that it's exciting but relaxed at the same time when you live in Asia for a long time. So, Jeffrey, we thank you very much for the interesting insights. I learned a lot personally, and I also think our listeners learned a lot. Many greetings to Bangkok, and maybe see you again in the future in person or on other occasions. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeffrey.